September is Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month. It's an issue that unfortunately hits close to home here in New Mexico, but new resources and efforts from everyday New Mexicans are shining a spotlight on the tragedies often born in darkness. Thanks for joining us for Eye on New Mexico. I'm Griffin Rushton. Now, we're taking a deep dive into this extremely heavy subject, so before we get started, we want to remind you about the 988 Suicide and Crisis Hotline. It's completely free and available to anyone who needs help. Death by suicide is a long-standing issue throughout the United States. It is currently the 11th leading cause of death nationwide, with more than 49,000 Americans taking their own lives in 2022.
It's a very serious and very persistent public health threat.
It is absolutely a public health crisis and something that we can not address enough.
It's a crisis, and unfortunately, we are losing too many people at a fast rate. And unfortunately, rural states like New Mexico are facing this heartbreaking issue more than others. According to the most recent data from New Mexico Health, 513 New Mexicans died by suicide in 2022, the same range we've been seeing since 2018, giving us the fourth highest suicide rate in the nation, only behind Montana, Alaska, and Wyoming, and that's unfortunately not new. New Mexico is ranked in the top 5 worst states for suicide for at least 2 decades now. It is a public health crisis that affects every demographic, but not equally. In New Mexico, men are 3 times more likely to take their own life, while white people accounted for 50% of all suicides in 2022, despite only representing about 1/3 of the population. But when you adjust these numbers for the population, Native Americans actually have the highest suicide rate in the state by far. Now, as for ages, the data shows New Mexicans 25 to 44 are now more likely to commit suicide than older adults or teens. And while this teen suicide rate right here does appear to be dropping, it's still well above the national average and still coming down from a major surge in the 2010s. Now, there's not much data on other factors like marital status or income, but New Mexico Health's lead suicide prevention coordinator says there is one profession that stands out.
Tell you is one of our top occupations in New Mexico is construction workers and dying by suicide. So many people in the construction industry by demographics already have a higher risk factor. And that certainly encompasses, plus it's long hours, they're away from their families, it's tough work. So I have recently been at 2 of our largest construction organizations, and in 7 minutes, I distributed 250 gun locks.
And there's a good reason for that. Data shows gun deaths are by far the most common form of suicide in New Mexico and reached an all-time high in 2021. That troubling statistic was one of the main reasons New Mexico state lawmakers pursued a mandatory 7-day waiting period for all gun sales in New Mexico, which was signed into law earlier this year.
It's really about creating a space of time, so that someone that might have the impulse to commit suicide with a quick and easy method would have some time to think about it.
That mandatory waiting period is still new, so there's no data yet showing how it's impacting suicide rates. But limiting access to guns only goes so far. Experts and advocates all agree there is really only one way to truly overcome suicide.
Need to talk about suicide, and it's okay to talk about suicide.
You asking them if they're feeling suicidal or like ending their lives will not increase the likelihood that they will do that.
A good way to reduce the stigma is to change the narrative in the way we speak about suicide.
So that is the objective. That is, we're trying to make a safe place to talk about it and, normalize the conversation.
Events like this are working to normalize that conversation. Hundreds of New Mexicans participated in the annual Out of the Darkness Walk last weekend. It's put on by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention every year to raise money for suicide prevention efforts, but many attendees will tell you that's not why they get involved.
The difficulty with losing a loved one is that we're never going to know why. We're never going to know why. But if we can help someone else to get the help and the information they need, then we're doing a good thing.
That awareness is key, and if we can save a life, that's what we're here for.
This year's Out of the Darkness Walk raised more than $48,000 for suicide awareness and prevention efforts. I sat down with local board member Aaron Vega to discuss what those efforts look like and why there's still a long road ahead.
It's an epidemic. This is something that we need to grasp one way or another. I think it's too close for home. It is. I think, I mean, I don't know if you've ever experienced losing someone or know someone, or maybe even experienced it yourself. You know, mental health is something that I feel that we as a world are facing, and so it's just getting worse.
So tell me a little bit about what kind of work you guys do.
So AFSP is known to provide resources and education. That is our main focus. So from anywhere to, you know, going to the schools and having a conversation with students, to going to, you know, different work environments and providing resources and tools and how to speak and how to talk about suicide in a work environment.
What is the conversation you're trying to have with them? What are some of the messages that you're trying to spread with these groups about suicide awareness and prevention?
I think our objective is to know what to look for, right? What are signs of suicide? And then the resources, 988, you know, that's something that's you can call them and they have access to counselors and therapists, and that's, you know, the suicide hotline, you know, getting them to the right therapist, getting them the right resources, and how to talk to someone who is suicidal, and just learning the art of listening. Sometimes it's just that simple, and just listening to someone who may be in a tough place.
Is suicide something that has impacted your life before?
Unfortunately, yes. It's I just lost someone a few weeks ago, probably about a month ago. 20 years old, 22. Earlier this year, I lost someone, and so it seems that this happens too often in New Mexico to not bring light to it, and that's kind of where the walks come in, and why it's called Out of Darkness is because we're literally trying to bring light to those who have either experienced being suicidal or was affected and in a place of grief, which looks different to everybody.
I know you guys have done walks like this in the past. Have you guys seen turnout grow over the years?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think the more that the word gets out, we're trying to get as creative as possible in getting the word out. You know, this is an issue for everybody across the line, so there's not any particular individuals that we're trying to focus on, because the issue is across the board. I know we recently just had a booth at a construction conference, and you know, with construction workers, military. Unfortunately, we are one of the highest rates for adolescent suicide. So we try to work with other, you know, different organizations and bring resources and trying to educate them in how to discuss the issue and how to talk about it, and giving them, you know, kind of what it looks like when someone is suicidal, because sometimes you don't realize that someone's in a dark space and they're smiling, and you know, you just have no idea.
So what would be your message for people who maybe don't understand how serious of an issue this is in New Mexico?
It's a crisis, and unfortunately, we are losing too many people at a fast rate, and whether they're not, you know, they're not seeing it and may not have a personal experience, it's 3 degrees away. And the importance of just being kind in our world today, because whether it transpires in some form of violence or, you know, there's so many things going on, but everything that is going on in the world is very overwhelming for everyone. And it's, I can't say it enough, the importance of being kind, and not, most importantly, that there is hope and there is resources and there are people here to support and love you and here to listen to you. You know, these are very complex questions, and yet they may seem very simple, but everybody has a different, you know, experience with this this epidemic. You know, we're in a mental health crisis, and so, you know, again, it reads different for everyone.
We're about to kind of get in the middle of September, which is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. What's one thing you would want everyday New Mexicans to maybe do this month, or maybe think about this month as this issue comes more to the forefront?
Listening more and being more kind. It's literally, I mean, it's simple. Listening and being more kind, and validating your emotions for what they are. And that's the thing is, you know, I think it's so hard to cope with pain and to process pain. And this is why we're in the position, is because there's not enough tools for people to be able to process their pain. And pain looks different for everybody else. And, you know, we are taught so many different ways to suppress that pain. And the result of that is suicide. And so with that being said, validate your emotions for what they are, honor them. And if you're feeling in a place of discomfort, talk to someone and create your tribe, create your circle, and reach out to us. If you feel like you don't have anybody, go to our website, reach out to us, and we will be there. We will be there, and we will flood you with the resources that you need to gain that strength. And it's one breath at a time. You know, a lot of people say, oh, it's just a day at a time. It's one step at a time. No, it's one breath at a time.
Awareness is crucial for suicide prevention, but so are the people offering help to people when they need it most. Still to come, we're breaking down some troubling new numbers with Albuquerque's Community Safety Department and taking a look at efforts to help veterans on the Navajo Nation. Plus, how one local brewery is making sure New Mexicans know where to call for help. Suicide is a complex and heavy topic, especially when you're dealing with someone who is considering taking their own life. That's one reason why the Albuquerque Community Safety Department exists. Their team of first responders are trained to handle those complex situations, and department reps say those situations are becoming more common here in the metro.
Tell me a little bit about what ACS's role is. How do you guys handle suicide? How much do you handle suicide-related cases?
So that's been increasing as we've been growing. We were developed to respond to behavioral health calls, including suicidal calls. So we have someone trained in that sort of dispatch process that helps identify those calls correctly and send the appropriate response, which often does include an ACS responder.
So I'm curious, when you guys are training new responders, you know, what's kind of the policy, or how do you guys train first responders to deal with suicide? What's the kind of conversation you're encouraging them to have?
So similar to what I mentioned about just being comfortable asking the questions. The typical things we want to gather information-wise would be intent, if someone is really wanting to kill themselves, or are they just blowing off steam? Also, if we ask if they have a plan, have they figured out a way that they are going to do this? And also, do they have means? Do they have access to lethal means, like a gun, for example, pills, rope, knives? And we also train the responders to gather as much information as possible from multiple perspectives as appropriate. So not just the person, but maybe the household members there, even a provider that they're seeing, if they're comfortable with that. So we can get as much information as possible and then try to support this person the best way we can. And whether that be with an offer to transport to the hospital, referring them to counseling, doing a safety plan with them. And then, again, we provide those resources to the person at risk and their household members too.
Tell me, you know, how often are you guys dealing with suicide? How much of that is part of your work?
So the numbers are increasing. The past 90 days, we've seen a 23% increase in those suicidal related calls compared to the prior 90 days. And so the whole year is trending upwards of 1,500 at the moment, but it keeps increasing.
Is there any clues of what's driving those numbers up, or is it kind of one of those things that ebbs and flows throughout the year?
It's hard to say. I think that just the response system and the public are just getting more familiar with what ACS does, what we're here to do, what we can provide, and what we can handle. And so I'm thinking that has a lot to do with it as well. We've also hired more staff and more responders. And
I know we've heard there's a push for resources for victims of violent crime and families after that. Mm-hmm. Do the same kind of resources exist for the families of the victims of suicide?
We do respond to those imminent situations where there is a threat of suicide, but when tragedies do happen, we also have a program through ACS that can respond to kind of the aftermath, whether it be neighbors affected by the death or the tragedy, or family or friends of the person that was lost. And they do follow up, and they also do try to wrap the person around with support and referrals, information, education.
ACS reps are encouraging New Mexicans to check in on their loved ones if you think they're in a dark place. Experts say just simply talking about those dark thoughts can help relieve the pressures that often lead to suicide. One group that often feels the weight of suicide is our veterans. According to federal data, 6,300 service members died by suicide in 2021, and that includes 69 here in New Mexico, representing 13% of all suicides in our state that year. New Mexico state lawmakers approved a bill earlier this year directing the state's Veteran Services Department to expand mental health resources for veterans in our state. But there are other groups out there making sure struggling veterans on the Navajo Nation are also getting the help they need.
You go through a lot of the stuff that some of these ladies and gentlemen have gone through, and you try to still be normal.
Cassandra Morgan is a second-generation U.S. Marine veteran.
I joined the Marines because my dad's a Marine. He's a Vietnam veteran.
And she knows life after the military is not easy for everyone, especially in the vast Navajo Nation.
Native Americans in general, they have a high suicide rate because of the rural vastness and lack of resources, where they're at.
According to the most recent data from the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, the number of Native American veteran suicides surged in 2021, nearly 10 points higher than white veterans.
Sometimes our veterans run into hardships, they find obstacles, and usually that starts like a domino effect into thinking there's no way out, or it's just an endless cycle.
She says it was hard finding help when she got out of the military back in the 90s, and based on her conversations with recent veterans, she knows not much has changed.
I asked him, I said, what's your experience like as far as transitioning? He says, my uncle told me to go register with the veterans, and that's it. I said, Marine, I've been where you're at, and there was nobody there to help me. I said, so now here's the difference. I'm here. What do we need? Let's go get it.
Morgan is a program lead with the Diné Nazba Partnership, a group dedicated to making sure Native veterans can find and access whatever help they need.
You always see the look on their faces, like somebody finally understands. Somebody knows what this is like. I've filed my own claim. I've gone through the healthcare system at the VA. I've been homeless. I've had to sleep in my car, so I know how to come back from that.
Spreading knowledge and kindness to the heroes who need it most.
If you look at it as not suicide awareness, but living healthy, living a quality way of life, and knowing that it's out there, there's opportunities for that to be better. As long as you're here, as long as you're still in the fight, you're good to go. We can make it somehow.
Awareness is, once again, crucial for suicide prevention, and one veteran from Alabama is spreading that message 1 mile at a time. Felice Romero caught up with him last month as he made his way through the land of enchantment.
Meet retired Chief Petty Officer Robert Luna. For 28 years, he served in the Coast Guard and knows firsthand the struggles of veterans readjusting to civilian life.
I went through my own suicidal episode about 2 years ago. I was strong enough to get through it, but I know others are not.
Now he's lacing up his shoes and going on another journey across America.
Walking saved my life, and the reason I'm walking across America is to show that if you have other avenues to exert your energy and thoughts, that is way better than any medication.
This time to talk about mental health and the resources for veterans when they come back home.
As we're walking across America to raise awareness for military veterans that are struggling with mental health illnesses throughout the United States that don't have readily available care for them.
Luna started his journey in Alabama back in May, making his way to Arkansas, Oklahoma, and now New Mexico.
On average, right now, I'm doing 10 to 18 miles a day, depending on the town, the heat, the elevation. When I first started, it was upwards of 20 to 25 a day.
He says New Mexico's elevation has been challenging, but even when the going gets tough, he reminds himself of other veterans who may be suffering like he was years ago.
There have been a handful of days where I have thought about quitting. I've thought about getting an e-bike and just hooking up my cart and just pedaling the rest of the way along with the electricity help. But I have hold strong, and I am determined to make it through this elevation and mountain ranges and the desert to achieve the goal.
Feliz Romero, KOB4.
According to Luna's website, he is currently in central Arizona, but he still has a long way to go until he makes it to Southern California. Still to come, a local brewery making sure New Mexicans know who to call when they need help the most.
I would reckon at some point we're all going to call 988 at some point.
It was just about 2 years ago when a new national suicide and crisis hotline entered the chat, so to speak, 988. It's a free hotline completely devoted to people experiencing a mental health crisis or are having suicidal thoughts. And according to the state's Human Services Department, more than 67,000 New Mexicans have already reached out for that help.
988 has been a game changer, and truly when we needed so many resources for mental health and we were lacking, which we still are in New Mexico and across the country.
It's a crucial resource, as you could imagine, but it's still pretty new, and one local brewery is making sure New Mexicans know those three numbers.
Suicide, depression, it's nothing new in this country, let alone this industry, especially nowadays.
And the folks at Ex Novo Brewing Company are making sure New Mexicans know where to find help, one pint at a time.
We're doing this collaboration, and it simply is to raise awareness about the 988 crisis hotline.
Starting Wednesday, Ex Novo will add a special 988 beer to the menu. It's a partnership with Arizona-based OHSO Brewery, on tap at both of Ex Novo's tap rooms and on shelves all over the state.
There's no monetary donation being donated. We're channeling all of our efforts into just spreading awareness about this hotline and resource.
And that's because suicide hits close to home at Ex Novo.
We lost our head brewer, Ryan Buxton, 2 years ago. Losing him was such an impact, not just on our business, but he was a dear, dear friend to many of us. And it's something that I would hope that no other brewery would ever have to go through ever again.
But unfortunately, they know other breweries like OHSO have gone through it.
Their head brewer has also been directly impacted heavily with suicide of loved ones from a young age all the way up until current day.
Like the 988 hotline, the brewery effort is nationwide. 44 different breweries across 17 states are getting involved for Suicide Awareness Month. But Ex Novo says it's also planning a special release in January for Buxton's birthday.
Because it is one of those things that we shouldn't just talk about once a year. It should be on tap and accessible and reminding people of this all of the time.
A pint, a conversation starter, and maybe a lifeline.
Maybe get a 4-pack and share it with some friends and connect over something and get a little personal. Ask the important questions that we all need to hear and mostly feel seen. It's that 30 seconds of awkwardness sometimes can lead to a life-changing moment, though.
Again, we can't emphasize it enough. These are the three numbers you need to know if you are in a crisis and need help. 988. You can call, text, or even chat with someone online. It's completely free and confidential. Well, that's all for this weekend. We'll be back next Sunday at our new permanent time of 9 a.m. with another Eye on New Mexico.